They say good fences make good neighbors, but nobody ever tells you what a shared driveway makes. I'll tell you what it makes. It makes sworn enemies out of saints, and it turns a quiet cul-de-sac into a battlefield. If you're reading this, maybe you're looking at a house right now. Maybe it's got 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a finished basement, and a great school district. But if the realtor mumbles something about a common access easement or a shared driveway, I want you to run. Don't walk. Run. My name is Mark. I bought a charming 1950s ranch-style home in a suburb just outside of Columbus, Ohio. It was perfect. Brick facade, big oak tree out front, and a price I could actually afford. The catch was the driveway. It was a single, double-wide slab of concrete that ran between my house and the house next door, splitting off into a Y at the very back near the garages. For the first 6 months, it was paradise. The house next door was empty, a foreclosure sitting quiet and dark. I had the whole slab to myself. I parked in the middle, I washed my car on weekends, I lived in blissful ignorance. Then the sold sign went up, and 2 weeks later, Greg moved in. Greg was a retired logistics manager. I know this because he told me within 30 seconds of meeting him. He was a man who believed the world was chaotic and that he was the only one with the organizational skills to fix it. He measured things, he judged things, and unfortunately for me, he owned a massive extended cab dually pickup truck that was roughly the size of a small barge. The war didn't start with a scream. It started with a tape measure. I came home from work one Tuesday to find Greg kneeling on the concrete in the sweltering July heat. He had a yellow tape measure stretched tight across the width of the driveway. He was making little chalk marks every few feet. "Hey, Greg," I said, stepping out of my sedan, "everything okay?" He didn't look up. He just made another mark. "Just verifying the boundary line, Mark. The deed says the property line runs dead center. That's 120 inches. I measured your car. You're parking about 4 inches over the median line." I laughed. I thought he was joking. "Oh, sorry about that. I usually just pull in. Didn't realize I was drifting." "Precision matters," Greg said, finally standing up. He wasn't smiling. "I have a large vehicle. I need my full allotment of space. From now on, stay on your side." That was the first red flag. The second was the cones. A week later, I pulled in to find orange traffic cones glued. Yes, glued with construction adhesive down the center line of the driveway. It looked like a highway construction zone. To get to my garage, I had to navigate a narrow chute of concrete. If I hit a cone, I risked scratching my bumper. I went to his door. I knocked. He opened it, holding a sandwich, looking completely unbothered. "Greg, the cones, really?" He said, "Visual aids. Helps you maintain your lane. It looks like an obstacle course. Can we just be reasonable? I'll stay on my side, you stay on yours. We don't need glued down cones." "They stay until you prove you can drive straight," he said, and closed the door. I went out that night with a putty knife and scraped them up. It took me 2 hours. The next morning, they were back. But this time, they were bolstered by a camera. Greg had mounted a security camera on his eaves pointed directly at the driveway. Fall turned to winter, and the Cold War turned hot, or I guess freezing. In the Midwest, snow is a part of life. In a shared driveway scenario, snow is a weapon. The first big storm dropped 8 inches. I went out early, fired up my snowblower, and cleared my side. Being a decent human being, I also did the apron, the part where the driveway meets the street, so both of us could get out. I came home that evening to find a wall of snow blocking my garage door. Greg hadn't just cleared his side, he had angled his snowblower chute to discharge every single flake of snow from his property directly onto mine. It was packed tight, a 3-foot berm of ice and slush right in front of my car. I saw him watching from his window. I grabbed my shovel and marched over to his door. He didn't open it this time. He just spoke through the Ring doorbell camera. "Get off my porch," the electronic voice crackled. "You buried my car, Greg," I yelled at the plastic lens. "I cleared my property. Where the snow lands is gravity's problem, not mine." "That's not how physics works, and you know it. You did this on purpose." "Civil matter. Call the cops if you want. They won't do a thing." And he was right. I called the non-emergency line. The officer who came out looked tired. He looked at the snow, looked at the driveway, and sighed, the sigh of a man who hates neighbor disputes. "Look," the officer said, hitching up his belt, "ideally he shouldn't do that, but unless he physically touches you or damages your property, it's a civil dispute. We can't arrest him for being a jerk with a snowblower." Greg knew the law. He knew exactly where the line was, and he danced right on the edge of it. I had gone away for the long weekend to escape the stress. When I pulled back onto the street on Monday afternoon, I thought I was hallucinating. There was a fence, but not a normal fence. Greg had hired a contractor to install a heavy-duty steel bollard fence, essentially steel posts set deep into the concrete right down the center line of the driveway. But here was the problem. The driveway wasn't perfectly straight. It curved slightly. By installing the posts in a straight line, Greg had cut off the angle I needed to pull into my garage. My side of the driveway narrowed to about 6 feet at the choke point. My car is 6.5 feet wide. I couldn't get to my garage. I was blocked out. I parked on the street, my hands shaking. I walked up the narrow sliver of concrete I had left. Greg was out there polishing the steel posts with a rag. "Greg," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, that dangerous kind of calm, "I can't get my car in." "Property rights," he beamed. "I have the right to secure my border. I built exactly on the survey line. I even paid for a rush survey to be sure." "You've rendered my driveway unusable. That's illegal." "Nope," he popped the P. "You have access. You can walk to your door. Nobody guaranteed you vehicle access for a car that wide. Maybe you should buy a motorcycle." He tapped the steel post. Clang. "This is permanent, Mark. Get used to it." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with the property deed and a bottle of whiskey. I read the legal description of our lots until my eyes blurred. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I went to the best real estate attorney in the county. Her name was Sarah, and she was known as a shark in a pantsuit. I showed her the photos. I showed her the videos of the snow, the cones, and finally, the steel posts. Sarah looked at the photos. Then she pulled up the county GIS maps on her screen. She squinted, then she zoomed in. Then she pulled a dusty book of plat maps off her shelf. "Mark," she said, looking up over her glasses, "Greg said he got a survey done." "Yeah, he said he built right on the line." "Did you see the surveyor?" "No, I was out of town." Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who just found wounded prey. "In this subdivision," she explained, "the driveways weren't built on the property lines. When these houses were built in the 50s, the developers utilized a reciprocal easement agreement. Basically, your property line doesn't go down the middle of the concrete. The property line is actually 3 feet past the edge of the driveway on his side." "Wait, what?" "The driveway," she tapped the map, "is almost entirely on your land. But because of the easement, he has the right to use it to get to his garage. However, the easement strictly forbids any permanent obstruction that impedes the free flow of ingress and egress." "So, the fence. The fence isn't just illegal," Sarah said. "The fence is built on your property, and he's blocking an easement. We're not just going to sue him, Mark. We're going to bury him." We filed an emergency injunction the next day. The judge granted a temporary restraining order, but the posts stayed up until the hearing. The court date was 3 weeks later. Greg showed up without a lawyer. He was wearing a suit that was too tight, carrying a binder labeled evidence. He looked smug. He thought he was the smartest guy in the room. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Miller, looked over the filings. "Mr. Gregg," she said, "you installed steel bollards in a shared driveway." "I installed them on my property line, Your Honor," Gregg said, standing up, "to prevent encroachment." My lawyer, Sarah, stood up. "Your Honor, Exhibit A, the certified survey dating back to 1954, and a confirmation survey we had performed last week." She handed the papers to the bailiff. The judge opened the map. She looked at it. She looked at Gregg. "Mr. Gregg, did you hire a surveyor?" I measured it myself, based on the curb markers. I know how to use a tape measure." "You measured from the curb markers." The judge actually laughed. "Sir, curb markers move. Snowplows hit them. Kids kick them. You built a permanent steel structure based on a guess?" The judge turned to the easement document. "This easement," she read, "grants perpetual, unobstructed access for both parcels. Mr. Gregg, by installing these posts, you have violated the easement. Furthermore, according to this survey, these posts are 18 inches onto Mark's property." Gregg turned pale. "That's impossible." "It is a fact," the judge said. "Here is the order. 1. You have 48 hours to remove those posts. 2. You will repair any damage to the concrete at your own expense. 3. You are permanently enjoined from placing any object, snow, cones, cars, or debris within the easement area." "But," and 4, the judge continued, her voice dropping an octave, "since you acted with malice and blocked a neighbor's access to their home, I am awarding the plaintiff legal fees. You're paying for his lawyer, sir." The gavel bang sounded like a gunshot. 2 days later, a crew showed up to remove the posts. Gregg sat on his porch, head in his hands, watching them jackhammer the steel out of the concrete. It cost him thousands to install and thousands more to remove and patch, plus my legal bill. But the story doesn't end there. Remember what I said about the property line? Sarah, my lawyer, had given me a very interesting piece of advice on the way out of the courthouse. "Technically," she had said, "since the property line is 3 feet past the edge of the driveway on his side, that means the strip of grass he's been mowing next to the driveway, that's yours. And the spot where he steps out of his giant truck, that's yours too." Gregg had spent a year screaming about boundaries. I decided it was time to respect them. The next weekend, I went out with a tape measure. I marked the real property line, which was well onto what Gregg thought was his lawn. I didn't build a fence. No, that would be rude. Instead, I planted rose bushes. Beautiful, thorny, aggressive rose bushes. I planted them right along the true property line, leaving exactly enough room for the shared driveway easement, but not an inch more. Here is the kicker. The easement allows for vehicular passage. It does not grant an easement for pedestrian traffic on the grass. Now, when Gregg pulls his massive truck into the driveway, he has a problem. The truck is so wide that when he opens his driver's side door, it swings out over the property line, directly into my prize-winning 3-inch thorn rose bushes. He can't step out on the grass because that's my garden. He can't swing his door wide open because of the thorns. He has to pull into his driveway, shut off the engine, crawl over the center console, and exit out the passenger side of his truck every single time he comes home. It's been a year since the court case. We don't speak. He doesn't look at me. He just quietly crawls out of the passenger side of his truck, looking defeated. The driveway is clear. The snow gets shoveled to the respective sides. The cones are gone. I still believe that good fences make good neighbors. But in my case, a very expensive lawyer and a row of thorny rose bushes made for the best neighbor I could ask for, a silent one. So, if you're looking at that house with the shared driveway, just measure twice, and maybe keep a good lawyer on speed dial.